Thursday at this time is, well, time to go to the movies, isn't it? As ever, James Luxford is here. Hi, James.
Hello.
Movie reviewer for the Radio Times, Metro newspaper. And before we go anywhere else, I just know you'd want to say a few words about the passing of the legendary Kirk Douglas yesterday.
Yeah, what can you... where do you begin with Kirk Douglas? One of the great icons of Hollywood, and I think it was when Paul Newman passed, Jonathan Ross said it was kind of another connection to Lost, to that golden era of Hollywood studio system, and I think the loss of Kirk Douglas is another lost. We were that little bit further away from the establishing years of Hollywood that made it the business it was today. An incredible career. Where do you begin? Paths of Glory, Spartacus, Lust for Life. A very long and very successful career.
You mentioned Spartacus. It's, of course, the famous closing scene that he'll always be famous for.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm
Talking a bit earlier about back in the 1950s, he was one of those people who set up his own production company, one of the first actors to do that, and employ people who had been victims of the McCarthyite anti-communist witch hunts around that time. And you're making the point on what his Time to Talk Dave mentioned this a couple of times already. He also was one of the kind of the ground breakers when it came to doing movies or coming up with movie plot lines that dealt with mental health.
It did. I mean, you have to remember, it's probably a bit obvious now that we're a lot more open, but in the 50s, talking about, say, for example, in Lust for Life, he portrayed Vincent van Gogh as someone who was quite troubled, rather than a bit wacky or create the stereotypical crazy stereotype. And he also bought the rights to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which of course he played on stage, but he of course gave it to his son Michael, who then produced the film with Jack Nicholson, which won the Academy Award. He just, I think, looked a little bit deeper as an artist, and maybe things like Spartacus do kind of gloss over what a creative he was. He worked with Stanley Kubrick at a time when there was still a little bit of the studio system remained there, and he really believed in artists that were a little bit off the wall or were going in new directions. I went to the Stanley Kubrick exhibition last year, and there's a letter from him.
Wow.
No, obviously he basically saying, I will fend off the studio executives who are asking what on earth is going on with Spartacus, because I know you're doing well.
Wow.
And I think he signs it Spartacus as well.
Oh, really?
Which is wonderful.
Excellent.
So it just recognised what made good cinema, and an incredible lost Hollywood film.
Kirk Douglas, 103. That leaves us precisely about 2.5 minutes to rattle through this week's movies, James. What do you want to do first?
How about Parasite, the Oscar-nominated South Korean drama about a family living in poverty who con their way into the service of a wealthy family. However, eventually, the cracks in their big plan start to show.
뭐야, 소독해? 창문 닫아.
나도 봐. 공짜로 집안에 소독도 하고.
Yeah, all
You
in
got all
Korean.
that right.
So, but yeah, okay, fine.
You mean you don't speak South Korean?
I don't, James. Honestly, yes.
Obviously, this is it's a subtitled film, if you like, which has given it some stigma. A lot of people believe the stigma towards subtitled films has prevented it from getting the big awards at the Oscars. I thought this was fantastic, so smartly written, well acted. It's a thoughtful film, looks at the wealth divide in a way that I don't think many movies are looking at. And I do agree, I think if it were set in LA, I think if it were English, this would be going for every award.
Really?
And the director said at an award ceremony recently, if you get over that 1-inch obstacle of subtitles, you open yourself up to incredible stories, and this is a good example of that.
Parasite. From that, something a bit more Hollywood. Half term's coming when Dolittle with Robert Downey comes out.
Yeah, it's Robert Downey Jr.'s first film since leaving the Avengers. It's the adaptation of a classic story about a doctor who can talk to animals.
Are you Dr. Dolittle?
Seen the bus sides for it. They look very impressive. What's the movie like?
Okay, we're a little pushed for time, so I'll just say awful.
Oh, dear.
Robert Downey Jr. Speaks with a thick Welsh accent for no reason at all. There are plot twists that make no sense. The animals look cartoonish. I think this is probably one of the most jumbled, messy films I have seen in a very long time.
Oh, dear.
That
okay,
enough?
we're drawing a veil over that very quickly then. This next one, Underwater.
A sci-fi thriller starring Kristen Stewart as a technician in an underwater facility that experiences a breach, and she must find a way to escape before it's too late.
Listen carefully. You are now 5,000 miles from land, and you're descending 7 miles to the bottom of the ocean. See you all in a month.
Here we go.
Really? Okay. It started with kind of like Jaws stuff, and then it goes into a Isley Brothers song.
I mean, yeah, this wasn't for me. It's a little bit bland. If you've seen The Abyss, it's a very kind of pale imitation of that. Tries to replicate that sort of tension, that sort of drama, but just a bad script, quite bad acting, and yeah, I think there's a lot better films made in this sort of genre.
Okay, give it a wide berth. James, always good to see you. Thanks for coming in. James Luxford, whose movie reviews you can read every week in the Radio Times and the Metro newspaper.
BBC Coventry and Warwickshire travel.